from Caravan RV Camping. We are here for our 9th episode of CRVC TV. We're here with Greg from the Caravan Repair Centre on the Sunshine Coast. We've got some clouds building up behind us, so we're hoping we can get this done before it hits. And we're hoping there's not too much in it for the guys down south and up north with all the flooding that's going on. So today we are doing a coupling and weight distribution hitch comparison. We have had a chat about this a few weeks ago and we did do a session on this, but it's a little bit easier for us to get it out and physically demonstrate it for you, demonstrate the difference between our weight distribution bars and couplings. So I'll flick over to Greg. We've got his car and his Jayco here, and we're going to do a hitching up demonstration, then we'll go over to some different couplings. Hey Greg.
Hi all, hope everyone's had a great week and stayed safe. As Renee said, today we're just going to run you through the very basics of hitching your van to the vehicle and setting up your weight distributing hitch, so you have an idea of where you should start from as a roundabout. Now there can be a little bit of complexity around it, but today I'll run you through some of the very simple things that you can do to get yourself started in that setup process. So one of the first things to do is obviously get your vehicle quite close to your van, not hooked on. Get your van level, so try and get on a known piece of level ground and wind the van level. Tape measure is really handy. Once you've got your van level, do a measurement. So from the beginning of your hitch head, I like to use the front of an A-frame, it's quite easy to do. So find that data point. On mine, around about 400mm for argument's sake. Yours may be different. Once you know that point, you know that's where you've got to get back to. Obviously for safe towing, you want 10 to 15% of the weight of the van on your ball and the van level. And that's what we're trying to achieve. And we're trying to keep the vehicle level, keep that weight on the front suspension for braking and handling, as we discussed last time, and the van level. You see lots of vans going down the road at really strange angles, and people wonder why they're very difficult to control. Because you haven't got those basic parameters set. Your 10 to 15% on the nose and the van level. So we know my van's pretty level on the ground. We're sitting up the front. So what I'm going to do is start at about 400mm. We're going to wind that up so we can bring the vehicle back and hitch it on, and then we can go through that level up process. So we'll wind it right up. Obviously we've got to come up a little way to get onto the ball. If you tow it with something like the 200 series, you'll notice the suspension are quite soft on them, so they do sag a little bit under load, especially if you've got a really big van. Just bring the vehicle back. And again, be mindful, the driver can't see you can't see them, you can't communicate with one another. A lot of people like to use radio. Just the gentle hand signals work quite well. Just practice. It's quite a simple process. No need to get all stressed about it. A lot of people do end up in couple fights whilst they're trying to hook on, but you know, it's quite simple. Yes. You watch, as I take the weight off the jockey wheel, you'll notice the back of the vehicle starts to sag down. So my van is not particularly heavy for my vehicle, as I do have very heavy rated springs in the back, so I keep a lot of camping gear most of the time. So as I said, on your standard 200 series, where I started at 400mm and I've put this weight from the van on the rear of the vehicle, you'll find you'll sag well below that. What we can do is we just check where we are. I'll take this jockey wheel off. Just say we're just fractionally under now. So I'll just take the jockey wheel off, all the weight's on the vehicle. You can leave this jockey wheel on, it does make your job a little bit easier, but for today, just so you have a little bit of better vision, we'll get rid of this out of the road and make life a lot easier. Again, anything you undo, make sure you secure back up. There are a lot of road vibrations, so make sure you've tightened everything up. We'll just pop the jockey wheel out of the road. Okay, we're going to start. First thing, make sure our hitch head is down and locked. At this point, we can remove our handbrake. So again, make sure the handbrake lever is forward so that you've disengaged, and your safety lock is pushed to the rear. Again, so bouncing up and down on the road, you can't accidentally get your handbrake coming on and dragging your brakes on, causing damage to the brakes and overheating. We'll leave our electrical harness just off to the side for the moment. We'll start with our linch pins. Just keep them safe, and obviously your totem bar. Now this is a Pro Series hitch, So it enters from underneath the hitch. Your Hayman Reese enter through the side, but on these they come up. So quite simple, you see it self-supports one another. Now because I travel regularly, I've actually got my chains preset. So these links you'll come to know as a standard height for your standard travel. When you're doing a major trip, you may have to adjust them. Use your bar, and again, you would stand normally 2-footed and use your hands. Again, these can be quite dangerous, especially on very large vans. I've seen them slip down and cause stitches. My van, as I said, is quite light on my tow ball. I can do it fairly simply just by hand, so I don't have any problems there. Again, make sure you use your secure pins, make sure it's down. Just make sure your chains are nice and secure in there with the dress. And again, the same with the other side. For your secondary bar. Straight through. And if you notice, we've got 1, 2, 3, 4. So we're on the 4th chain up. We replicate that on the other side. Quite a simple process of just counting your chains out. Again, stand quite wide, put it two solid hands on it, bring it up into the over centre, hold some positive weight on that handle until you've got that pin nicely secured in there. Make sure it's safe. Again, if you've got any free chain, I like to just dress it up onto the A-frame, keeps everything neat, stops everything rattling around. From there, I generally like to go to my breakaway. So again, this is your breakaway for vans of over 2 tonne in weight. It needs to be affixed to a firm point on the back of the van, to your vehicle. So you need to find a nice solid mount point in case that it does become disconnected. And that will provide a breakaway switch on your brake to the van. Disconnected, the crossing chains, the A-frame will drop into that saddle, hopefully you won't connect with the road, and the chances of pulling up safely are much, much higher. So again, do bear those sort of little things in mind as you're doing it. For those that are new to a caravan, I do highly recommend writing yourself a little checklist. Just have it laminated, keep it in the van, and just tick off the items as you go through. Quite easy. Particularly if someone comes up and starts talking to you while you're pitching up, you get distracted and you forget exactly where you are and you may miss something. So the last in the interval are your power connectors. Now I run an Anderson plug for my fridge and I also run my 12-pin plug. So both of those will be connected now. So double check that your harnesses are nice and tight in there. There's no movement, they're not likely to come out. The safety catches are on. Okay, I generally then use this opportunity while I'm in close quarters to make sure my chains are locked. Hitch heads down, so I confirm by hand and point movement. Handbrake off, lanyard on, up and safe, handbrake locked. It's all connected. Then I do a light check. So I'll just turn on the light if you don't mind.
I think it's gone.
Turn on the light. So then I normally do a walk around, check all my running lights, check my indicators and my brake lights. As you see, we're back to a fairly level situation now. So we've got those caution bars. If you're wanting to run things like I do, stone stompers or stone guards on the units, again, they work quite effectively. I generally run a screen then, which is called a stone stomper between the van and the coach. These bars stay nice and clear, nice and parallel. Again, off-road situations, you shouldn't move your bars. undulating territory, even tight articulations. They tell you should actually drop this weight just as soon as you kick off, because it does apply a lot of pressure to the van. So what we've done is, by putting these bars on, that weight has gone to the back of the vehicle and has released the front of the vehicle. They torsionally put that weight back to the front of the vehicle, so I'm back in a nice controlled situation. Perhaps gives you a fairly good idea, because I said it's a very quick process, very painless process, and not overly complicated once you get used to it. So again, take the time, hitch up a few times, particularly if you're just new to caravans. Put it home, unhitch, hitch up, unhitch, hitch up, so you get very confident in what's going on. Most of the time you'll travel with about the same weight in the van. I certainly do. But when we do big trips and you're loaded up with extra gear, not only in the back of the vehicle but inside the van, again, it's time to look at the height adjustments. I keep a couple of little levels on the front of the van. It's a very easy visual tool to tell me that everything's back into square and we're good to go. We'll probably come over and I'll just show you a couple of different types of hitch heads that you can go. There's certainly a lot of different couplings that are on the market these days.
Let's have a look at yours while we're here, Greg.
Highland hitch, which is an off-road hitch. So again, fully articulating. Not only will the ball rotate, but it'll roll around left and right. So an off-road style hitch. From there you go to your DO35 off-road hitches, your Mick hitches, and your standard ball couplings. There's also some ARC off-road hitches these days. All do pretty much the same job. Make sure the head is rated for the van you're towing. This one's a 3,500 kilo assembly, matching the maximum capacity of the van that I'm towing. Again, you don't want a 2-ton hitch head on a 3-ton van. Obviously that's completely illegal, so you do need to make sure if you are going to replace your hitch head, you're replacing it with the same or a higher standard of head for the towing application that you're doing. Obviously they do a lot of work, so keep an eye on how they're going. These ones are great. They've got quite a few lubricable points on them, so you can keep the grease into them and keep them nice and supple. You don't want those joints drying out, things like that. We'll go around and have a look at our mobile stand.
Let's go down this way, guys. So I have just had one come through from Steve. My coupling is recessed. Does that matter?
You can get quite a few. So the recessed couplings for your more road-going vehicles. So if you can imagine your hitch head's up here and you're in a standard road-going vehicle, your ball's going to be a long way away, and no amount of adjustment through a multi-adjustable head is going to get you close to that. A lot of the off-road vans, so those vans that are lifted, have a recessed coupling. Mine certainly came with a recessed coupling, but because of the height where the tow bar comes out on a 200 series Land Cruiser are very high off the ground, I've had mine re-engineered with a top plate to lift the head up. So again, you need to look at the application that you're towing. My vehicle has also got a slight suspension lift in it, so I'm 2 inches further off the ground than I would have been from factory in that vehicle. So again, plays a big part in how you're going to get that back to that level situation. So you do need to look at the vehicle that you're going to be towing it with and the style of van and make that choice. So most manufacturers these days, certainly we do it, we make a drop hitch which will suit a greater range of vehicles. Sometimes you do have to have that changed around. So, you know, if a customer is going to be towing with a 200 series Land Cruiser or something higher off the ground, a fully modified four-wheel drive say, you may have to have this assembly changed to suit that particular application. They do supply within the kit what we call multi-adjustable heads, and you can see these here, they're all a multi-adjustable assembly, and they come in different designs. So this is what we call standard. For some of the 200 series, they can come down as long as sort of where my hand is now, and that gives you a great array of height. One of the only things to watch is when you get the great long chains, sometimes they can come in contact with the ground, especially over speed humps or out of garages. So again, have a look at the application. Certainly, if I left my hitch head where it was, I would have needed a shank which would have taken away all my ground clearance off-road. As I do a lot of free camping, obviously I needed that ground clearance, and I didn't want the head coming in contact with the ground and potentially damaging the assembly and therefore causing me a problem towing the van around the country. style. So what we're looking at is at the top of the assembly here is what we call a Hayman roof system. They're known as a trunnion style, so the bars actually come in from the side. Each suit their own application. So if you've got something like a bush tracker, this style of hitch head won't suit you because the bush tracker's A-frame is very wide. Because these bars generally come quite close and parallel your A-frame, they can come into contact in turning situations. So you may need to look at something like what I've got, a Pro Series or say an Easy Lift that come up from the bottom and therefore clearing your A-frame for that turn. Because as you turn, the bars do move around on your A-frame, obviously. Yeah, as I said, there's quite a variety of styles of hitches, so it's a matter of finding something that suits not only the van you've got, but the tow vehicle you're towing, and again, a range of hitch heads available. So you've got an ARC off-road head, your standard ball coupling, and look, a lot of people go to DO35. If you're not seriously in the off-road situation, your standard ball coupling works fantastically. There's a great amount of terrain you'll cover with a standard ball coupling. You don't necessarily need to go to an off-road coupling. Those that travel up the beach or really do a lot of bush free camping where you're across very rough terrain, certainly recommend you go to the off-road style hitch. But otherwise your standard ball coupling is very simple to operate and quite robust, so there's no problems there. And they do vary. So hopefully that gives you a little bit of an idea of exactly how to go about pitching your van up, and we look forward to some of the questions coming through.
Okay, so I'll just go back through a couple of these. One earlier, just on ball weight. Greg, is there any easy ways to quickly increase your ball weight if you get to the stage where you're hitching, obviously, and you're out?
There is. Simply moving around the gear inside of your van will help. So, axle backwards will relieve ball weight. Loading the van axle forward will supply extra weight. So, have a look at where you've got stuff stored in the van. If you've got some heavy groceries and things like that and you need some extra weight forward, look at placing those under a bed if it's forward or in forward cupboards, and that will increase your ball weight so you get back to that safe towing parameter.
Okay, we did the coupling. Do you prefer any sway control on your A-frame or ESC?
I would definitely recommend a sway control over ESC. Whilst ESC, I have one on my van. It's really designed for those emergency situations. It is not designed, and nor did the makers design those products for everyday standard applications. So, what I'm trying to convey to you is they're for the emergency situations. They're not to get your van to stop swaying on the highway as you travel from Brisbane to the Gold Coast or up to Cairns. They're there in the event that the van becomes uncontrollable for a particular reason. So you don't want to rely on things like your ESC to control movement in the van. What you want to do is get it hitched correctly first up. So certainly if you were looking at those two items and you're worried about sway, one of the friction sway devices would be the way to go. Saying that, with the right amount of ball weight, the right adjustment, set up correctly, you should find most applications will tow very politely. You don't often see, and most of these come standard where you can mount friction sway devices on the side to assist. You should not really need them in the long run. As I said, if you can get the right amount of weight with the correct design van, hitched right, it should be safe to tow. Then you use your ESC for those emergency applications where it will react much quicker than we can. They react in hundredths of a second. Unfortunately, human beings are a little bit slow. By the time we thought about putting the brakes on, we're generally too late.
Okay, thanks, Greg. What have we got here? It's gone through ball weight. We've gone through shanks. Any other questions? We've got one here about the caravans in the background. So Greg's is a Jayco Discovery.
I operate a Jayco Discovery Outback, so what you call semi-off-road truck van, and one of our Adamus Sapphire. So again, track van operations. So anything that you would likely want to do, River Road, Great Central Road, Birdsville Track, Tanami, fantastic application in the Sapphire area.
When we were talking about the recessing of the couplings, because this is something that's becoming more and more popular, Greg, would you advise anyone able to apply that themselves, or suggest taking that into your local repair centre to have that done, whether it's recessing or mounting the ball on top?
Generally, for that sort of operation, unless you're a very competent certified welder or engineer, I would say you're best to take those into your local repair centre. It is a specialist operation. There's lots of DIY products and applications you can do on the vans yourself. There's lots of work you can do quite easily on the caravans yourself. That sort of operation, like your suspension, I do suggest you leave to your specialist.
Okay. And between the three hitches, we get a lot of questions about the difference between the three. So obviously you've got the physical differences, but is there any usable difference between them?
There are some usable. Obviously, as you said, there's the physical difference the way they operate. When you look at your Pro Series bars, they won't suit certain applications. So because the bars come up from below, they will be quite low to the ground in certain applications with vehicles, and you may not have enough ground clearance, so that you will be scraping those all the time. So you do need to look at a particular van setup and vehicle setup. You may only be able to operate a trunnion style head in there. And same with the reverse, as I said earlier. Those with bush trackers or very wide off-road A-frames, or very deep A-frames, the trunnion bars don't particularly suit. So you may be better off with a Pro Series hitch. So you do have to look at each individual application. And again, I recommend most of your repair centres and your sales centres will be able to advise you on what will suit your application at the time of purchasing the van. If you're purchasing a second-hand van, certainly we offer the service, and I'm sure most competent repairers will, to advise you on what hitch is best for your application and to set that hitch up correctly for you. So run you through exactly what has to be done and how you do it, so that you're able to do that yourself from that point on. You know you've got it set correctly in the first place.
Okay. Another one come through from Steve. I've been told to raise my suspension to fit to these hitches. Can you explain this?
Okay, again, sometimes depending on the application, so if you were towing a normal road going van and you're wanting to tow it with a 200 series Land Cruiser, or particularly one like mine that does have slightly raised suspension, it's very difficult to get that A-frame level when your vehicle height is here and your van height is their level. As I said, the head drop that you require is enormous. So what a lot of people do is actually lift the van height to reduce that difference between the vehicles, and therefore only a minor application change to your multi-adjustable head is required. And again, these aren't only doing the job of taking the difference between the vehicles. Their primary function is to shift that weight that you have put on the rear suspension and removed from your front suspension back to the front suspension for braking and handling. So there are some misconceptions about what they do. A lot of people call them sway bars. They're technically not a sway bar. They are a weight distributing hitch, and they do that job. They distribute the weight back to the front suspension of the vehicle. When you're loaded correctly, when you're set up correctly, the van becomes stable. That's how they became known as stabilizers, but they're not actually stabilizers.
Okay. All right, thanks for that. Greg, is there anything you want to add safety-wise with hitching up before we tip out?
As I said earlier, it's one of those things, if you're not particularly confident and you haven't done a lot of towing, or you're not sure, certainly make contact with your local repairer. They're all very friendly, and I'm sure they're more than willing to help give you the right information to get the vehicle set up. We all travel for enjoyment, and there's nothing worse than having an accident, or potentially even worse, a fatal accident, whilst you're on holidays trying to enjoy yourself because you haven't got this correct. It's uncomfortable to drive when the van's not set right, and it spoils your holiday. So, as again, I can't stress enough, if you're not sure, find a competent repairer, get some good advice, and get it get it set correctly, you'll really enjoy the travel and you'll do hundreds of miles trouble-free and have a great holiday.
Cool. Thanks, Greg. Okay guys, that's us for our hitching. We will be not back next week because I'm going to take my babies away camping. So we're heading up north of the Sunshine Coast. Just to finish off this episode, Greg mentioned earlier about a checklist, so we might actually do one up this afternoon and pop that on our Facebook page if you want to come back. Download that one, print it off, laminate it, have it in the front boot so that every time you're going to re-hitch, do your checklist. And that's not just when you're leaving for your holiday, guys. A really important thing to think about is every time you're stopping, you're obviously changing the weight distribution throughout your caravan with usage of water, with changing your luggage. There's lots of elements that will change your weight throughout your holiday. So every time you're hitching up, even if you've just been there for a nightly stopover, make sure that you've got those weights on your ball correct and you've measured up those. Alright guys, thanks again and happy Easter. So we will check back in with you in a couple of weeks, but we'll let you know on the Facebook page. Thanks guys, see ya.